For many people, climate change feels a bit like a slow motion train wreck headed for all of us. Not surprisingly, it's on the minds of a lot of millennials and Gen Zs as they face the daunting tasks that lie ahead to deal with it. And that's where broadcaster and writer Britt Wray's new book plants its flag. It's called Generation Dread: Finding Purpose in an Age of Climate Crisis. She is Planetary Health Postdoctoral Fellow at the Stanford Center for Innovation in Global Health, and we're pleased to welcome Britt Wray to a virtual studio tonight from Los Gatos, California. Hi, Britt.
Hi, so good to be here.
It's so nice to see you again. I wanted to start by talking about something that caught my attention because you mentioned it twice in the book. Once in the book and then once in the acknowledgments. You write, this book has been painful to write. How come?
Oh, well, indeed. I am a science communicator and I have been studying, investigating the climate and wider ecological crisis for, since I was 17 and left home to study conservation biology in university. And then later, since I became a reporter broadcasting about what the anthropogenic impacts on the environment are now doing as they roll back to affect environmental and human health, and bearing witness to the climate crisis and other forms of threat, the biodiversity crisis, let's say, land transformation, what have you, bears a psychological toll for those of us who are professionally witnessing it 8+ hours a day, because it's very frustrating to know we have solutions that aren't being deployed by our leaders in order to maintain alignment with scientific guidelines that will help protect our future, not only for humanity, but a bunch of non human species as well that we're otherwise driving over the brink of extinction. That's painful in itself. So, a lot of us unwittingly kind of participate in forms of soft denial around how dangerous this crisis is becoming. We have a lot of ways in which to stick our heads in the sand and be preoccupied with other things. But when you don't have those defenses at your disposal, when you're really digging into it, it's tough. It raises anxiety, grief, anger, sadness, and basically mental exhaustion and burnout. So, those are the kinds of things that I've experienced while doing the writing for this book.
You describe yourself as feeling like a sitting duck, and some of the terms you've brought up, we're going to get more into. But I wanted to read something that you write in the book. You write, "It's the dread that's been hanging over me for the last few years. It rains the heaviest when I speak with people much younger than me, like the student climate strikers, my nieces and nephews, or the unborn child I so deeply want to have." You started Gen Dread as a newsletter before it turned into a book. What made you start the project?
So, we are in a moment when eco anxiety, which is really an umbrella term for a variety of distressing emotions a person can experience when confronting the climate and wider ecological crisis, not just anxiety, but it's rage and grief and sadness and fear, sometimes even terror, etc. And I wanted to be able to carve out a space in which people can take a tour of this landscape of rising eco anxiety that we know is out there in society, find forms of dealing with it that are helpful for their own health, coping that can produce the kind of psychological strength to deal with this, as well as importantly, harnessing the tools for collective constructive action out there in the wider society with others, which is the mental health intervention that's needed, climate action at the root, right? Beyond what any therapist can do with someone who's feeling stressed out in a clinical setting. And I knew this intimately because several years ago, my partner and I, when coming to that point in our life when we were saying, hey, I think, really want to have a kid, and we're addressing that in light of all of the climate reports that I read for a living and squaring that with the lack of effective, bold action, it birthed this painful dilemma for me around questioning whether or not I felt comfortable bringing another person into the world to deal with climate disruption. I needed to scrutinize my thoughts. I didn't know if my thinking was twisted or perhaps off base. I didn't see that fear really mirrored out in the society around me, nor in my friend group. And I started doing some research, discovered very quickly this was a frothing, active conversation, relatively underground. But in the years since 2017, when I was having those first questions arise in me, it has exploded on the world scene as something that we now have activist movements formed around. We have young people in the street writing that they're refusing to reproduce on their placards until governments make it safe for them to do so by taking effective climate action. We have celebrities and politicians talking to this point, and statistics. One study that my colleagues and I were involved in looked at the climate anxiety burden in 10,000 16 to 25-year-olds in 10 countries around the world, including Nigeria, Philippines, India, but also US, UK, France, and a variety of countries in between, low, middle, high income settings. 39% of those global respondents say that their feelings about the climate crisis make them hesitant to have their own children. And so that was my on ramp for looking at eco anxiety, but it's a much wider phenomenon than just that reproductive piece. And I became curious about how this is showing up in diverse forms of people's lives, communities, and what people are doing to productively deal with this and channel it for the kinds of collective actions that we need. So yes, it did hang over me as a heavy emotion because when confronted with young people and feeling for them, feeling their sense of belittlement and disillusionment around this crisis, as they don't sense that older generations are really heeding their concerns because they've inherited this crisis along with the duty to clean it up. What's needed are bridge builders of solidarity so that before it becomes too late,
Mhm.
we can do what's needed now in order to protect young people's futures in a robust way.
Well, you write about the importance of embracing climate related emotions like anxiety, fear, rage, and grief. Why is that?
They are here with us, whether we like them or not. Often we might try to ward off these uncomfortable feelings because it's difficult to sit with uncomfortable emotional affects, and that's very reasonable and normal. However, as we are forced to bear witness to precious environments becoming degraded or dealing with incurring disasters that threaten people we love, maybe people who we are compassionate for, even if we never meet them, non-human species, etc. We, of course, are going to pay a cost for that emotionally if we care, if we're connected to what's going on and not so numbed by unconscious defenses that we're not able to feel. And so, eco anxiety can be reframed as eco compassion or a form of love that is showing us, important information, something that we care for is deeply under threat. Therefore, we're feeling this. There's a quote about how bearing witness to suffering and imagining that it's not going to rub off on you is basically like walking through water and imagining that you're not going to get wet.
Mm.
And that's what is also relevant for this conversation about a rapidly warming world and changing environments that threaten our health. So we have to find ways of valuing this as not a pathology because it's not a medical disorder to have eco anxiety. It's not in the DSM. Mental health professionals argue that it should remain excluded. It's not to be cured. Instead, we need to find ways of valuing it, allowing it to be basically a compass showing us what we ought to alert our attention towards so that we can help do the work to reduce the threat. There's so much that can be done to reduce the harm and help heal these systems. And therefore, when it becomes an important part of that journey, we see that grief isn't to be avoided, anxiety isn't to be avoided, but it's to be dealt with, folded into our lives, and then normalized because it's here. People are feeling this, and we have to help each other through it.
I want to read another passage from your book. You write, a striking feature of the climate bubble is that it has generally denied permission to talk about the climate crisis in emotional terms, particularly in highly influential places. This neutrality is achieved most easily by not speaking in energetically charged terms about the terrifying implications of climate disruption. You also write, the stress of what's happening to the planet is living inside people's bodies. So how can acknowledging emotion alongside reason impact how we talk about the climate crisis?
Right. So there I was riffing off of an interview that I had done with a former lead author of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, which is put out by the UN, our most authoritative report describing what's going on with the climate that many thousands of scientific authors weigh in on. And she was saying that while throughout her entire impressive career, she has understood the dangers on a very visceral level of what's happening with the climate crisis. She's never felt comfortable conveying it in any emotional language to policymakers, to decision makers, to those in which she hopes her scientific information will have an impact so that it can affect real changes out there in the world because time and again, when scientists do become somewhat of an advocate by speaking with any form of urgency on this, they get dismissed, they get written off as being radicals or alarmists, and people will say, oh, we know they're on the side of climate change disaster, so don't listen to what they have to say, which is, of course, hugely threatening. No one would want that to happen to their research, and therefore, the best way to protect it is to stay very buttoned up and never ever bring in any aspect of that emotional human feeling portion and just speak in dry clinical language, present the gigatons and the graphs and call it a day. The problem is that that really doesn't convey the full human reality of what we're dealing with, which is that we can have troubling evidence that points out real dangerous scenarios and be full humans who can respond to it with an emotional appropriateness. And if we're going to be rational in science anyway, we need to recognize that people make decisions from irrational places. We are emotional decision makers, often even beyond what we do with our kind of systematic rational brains, as we like to think that we only make decisions from that standpoint. But we're really a mixture of the two. So allowing for that taboo to be lifted is important, because how is the public supposed to support policy when scientists can't even speak their full truth in terms of how they're relating to the data, when non-experts might not know how to relate to this? And so that was the point I was making there, in the sense of, I can hear you coming in, Nam. Go ahead.
No, no, no. It's okay. I wish you were here in person, because I thought it was so interesting. Because in the book, when I was reading it, you say that you never actually considered yourself a climate activist. So is there a little bit of that? You know, you don't want to be considered that high. You're hypersensitive to it, in the sense that if you are in the activism space, your work is not seen as credible. The same thing you said about the scientists, like it's dehumanizing who they are by saying that they can't be emotional.
Well, yeah, it's basically saying certain parts of you are allowed to work and the other parts aren't. But the problem is that it's increasingly straining and stressful for climate professionals to remain buttoned up in that way, because there's a real mental exhaustion. There's a burnout that many professionals are reporting as part of the experience of doing this work. We've got classrooms of environmental studies students who are despairing and overwhelmed because of simply going through their educational modules. And what's not working is simply dealing with this information in rationalist boxes and not making space to also contain the emotions. And by containing them, that means giving them a healthy space in which to be processed. Many environmental studies professors now are realizing that just by doing their work, they're leaving students hopeless and fatalistic about the future that they're apparently getting professional skills in to go work towards as environmental stewards. And what can be very helpful is to, instead of only talking about the science and the scary facts, is create a space in which to humanly process this through art, philosophy, the humanities, forms of conversation, and bringing in psychology. And when that happens, a flexible form of thinking can really alleviate the hopelessness and help people navigate this challenging material in ways that are more psychologically sustaining, building resilience. And similarly, we see that that could really help a lot of climate professionals who aren't students but have never been given permission to express that this stuff is emotionally draining. And so in the age of eco anxiety, people are asking for resources about how to deal with this. And it can all be harnessed and channeled for more productive outcomes if we can have a bit more of an emotionally intelligent conversation about the fact that we're not just rational creatures. We also have this whole internal world which gets affected on those emotional levels.
And I think too, we connect through emotions, right? Because you refer to the climate crisis as a hyper object that encompasses all space and time, making it extremely difficult for people to comprehend or intervene. And you write about the different forms of denial that exist. You argue that all of us participate in some degree of denial when it comes to the climate crisis, yourself included. In what ways do we do that?
Right. So the hyperobject is this term from the philosopher Timothy Morton, which really helps to explain why we're pretty bad at thinking and talking about the climate crisis and dealing with it at all, because it's so vast and all encompassing that it extends beyond the normal idea of what it means to be a thing, right? It's plastic in the oceans. It's what's coming out of our tailpipe if we drive a combustion engine car. It's concerns about future generations. It's in our energy bills. And so if we can't see where it stops or starts, how do we know where to locate ourselves and start to make a difference and intervene? Now, climate psychology tells us that we have tons of reasons why this is perpetuated. We have psychological defenses to protect us from anxiety and pain. And facing up to the full on reality of the climate crisis can raise anxiety as well as ambivalence about our own complicity in contributing to the problem in a variety of ways, depending on how we live and where we live, how we emit, what we do for work, and so on. And so instead of just the kind of straight up climate denial that we are very familiar with in terms of corporate lobbyists and politically corrupt politicians conspiring with the fossil fuel industry that has been knowingly misleading the public on the dangers of the greenhouse effect for decades, we also have soft denial, which lives within many of us when we have one eye open to the truth and we really say this ought to be dealt with. It's a huge priority. And simultaneously, we close the other eye and continue not making change. And basically, our ability to act is thwarted because we want to just continue with the status quo, which is comfortable right now in the present, at the expense of the future becoming quite terrifying if we don't have dramatic, bold action that we all have a role in helping to bring forth. So that's called disavowal. And the idea is just that, these psychological defenses are healthy in general. We've evolved them to help protect us from discomfort. When reality is really tough to bear, we've always had to apply a little bit of self delusion or wishful thinking to get by. But in this civilizational threat scenario, that's not serving us. And we really ought to be able to move beyond the ways that soft denial traps us so that we can get real with each other about all the power that we have in this moment to help heal these systems that are hurting us and improve the outcomes for the future.
Well, this denial is also rooted in our disconnection to in the environment, which you reflected on in your book. You're right. When we no longer see every bird, tree, or ladybug as worthy of our interest and engagement, we lose some of our own vibrancy as a living thing on this earth. Many of us are living in cities and depending on technologies. Is it still possible for societies to shift perspectives and see beyond a human centric way of life?
I think it absolutely is possible. And a lot of us in this time have unlearning to do, right? In terms of what it means to consider humans at the center of all this web of incredibly sophisticated, adaptive, living creatures that are enmeshed in symbiotic relationships. There's mutualism. Humans require the natural ecosystems and other species in order to live ourselves. If that gets despoiled and falls away, there will be no humanity to speak of. And to be able to really deeply understand that is important, of course, for survival and also to enrich our lives on a level of what it means to just appreciate the incredible gift of being part of the wider web of life in itself. So moving from domination to partnership is something that's required to restore ecosystem health overall. It's allowing us to get beyond frames of extraction and industrialism that just look at what we can take from nature rather than how we can also inherently value it and not just see it as some kind of dollar sign in which to relate to and take from. And all in all, we're dealing with a planetary health crisis. It's much broader than just the climate crisis. It's water use, it's land transformation, it's biodiversity. And what we know from a variety of scientific fields is that the accumulating effects of our behavior is now rolling back to bite us as the number one threat to human health, both in physical health and mental health. So, given this threat, what are we going to do to protect ourselves? We can absolutely fundamentally change by shifting our worldviews, which is possible even if these other modes of domination feel really entrenched. It's just that we need to talk about this and work with, especially communities that understand this and model other modes of being. Often, Indigenous societies have been leading the way on this for hundreds of years, and there's a lot to be learned from ways of questioning dominant models and getting curious about others.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because you write about the importance and nuances of learning and applying Indigenous knowledge for the environment. And you write this Indigenous peoples are actively involved in a process of reconstructing, reconstituting, and recovering their traditions from the assimilating forces of colonization. How can one generally partner with others in a deeply unjust society? Did you find the answer through your research for that?
Well, I found some starting ideas by interviewing an Indigenous philosopher named Kyle White, who wrote an article with other Indigenous co authors discussing how Indigenous knowledge is not simply for all humanity to take at this time, because there's an increasingly fervent request of their societies, their peoples and communities to be able to provide the life-sustaining knowledge that humanity needs in order to make it through a tough ecological crisis based in indigenous wisdom and these ideas of reciprocity and relating to nature in non-exploitative ways. And they write, well, yes, however, we continue to face oppression and our existence and continuance needs to be our primary concern. So we're not here simply to just load off information. It's like if you're trying to learn an instrument and every time you sit down to play and practice, someone says, recite for me, when actually they need time in order to recover interrupted knowledge systems that settler colonialism has violently taken from them in a variety of ways. And so that uncomfortable truth brings up this question of what it means to partner in ways that aren't recentering predominantly privileged people's needs at the expense of others who exist ongoing marginalization. And the conversation that I was able to learn is to really from a question of asking, what can I do to assist in that story that is unfolding and benefit Indigenous knowledge in a way that is mutually supportive and reciprocal, rather than about once again taking and doing so on one's own terms. And then that form of allyship will determine whether or not knowledge is passed on. And importantly, Indigenous knowledge systems are not simply to be thought of as some kind of big, valuable component of human experience that's been overlooked or to be rebooted from the past. It's ongoing, and to have dealt with everything that Indigenous peoples have endured for generations, for centuries, means that there's been a wide portfolio of knowledge, including traditional knowledge and modern science and a variety of other systems as well. So it's vibrant, it's ongoing, and through that evolution, really interesting forms of allyship and partnership can come to the fore right now in the march for planetary health in an intersectional way that helps all people. So much more. I wouldn't say that that's just one answer for solving such a huge problem, but it's a really generative place to start considering what it means to shift from domination to partnership.
Britt, some people might say that people are getting the identity of I'm not having kids because of the climate crisis. Maybe you weren't going to have kids anyway, but in the book you write there are different models to parent and have families. How would those communities look like?
Well, there are a variety of modes of family making that go beyond the narrow Western conception of a nuclear family with two adults and however many kids they have living in their private pod. There are Indigenous kinship systems. There are queer chosen families. There are ways of building houses with multiple parents who are not necessarily each other's lovers and having kids between them with lifelong relationships. I mean, that family is much more alive and vibrant as a concept than we often bring in an initial assumption of what it means to biologically reproduce. In the climate crisis, many people talk about adoption if they don't feel comfortable having their own kids biologically because of environmental concerns. At the same time, many climate aware people who are concerned about what young people are going to have to deal with are having kids, knowing that it puts a stake in the ground for them to continue working on this problem no matter what. And in the book, I really try and reflect on what it means to have kids amidst existential threat, which humanity has always been dealing with, whether you're living under an authoritarian regime or with the stresses of colonization or under the threat of slavery. I mean, there are so many moments in history by which it's not been easy to bring kids into the world, and yet they are brought in as a mode of continuance and being able to transmit culture and identity. And so it's no different here now. It's just that I think there's growing conversation deserves being contained. That means given a safe place in which these questions can be asked so that people can reckon with their fears about what's going on with the climate crisis and not feel shame for connecting family planning to it in the first place.
Britt, thank you so much. You've started a lot of conversations that are going to get people thinking in different ways. We really do appreciate your time, and congratulations on your book. It's excellent.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.